I'm losing it, you're losing it, Canada's losing it. What are we losing? The definition of fascism. Let's chat. Hello and welcome back to Losin It. I'm your host, Stephanie Hunter, and today I want to talk about something that's been weighing on me for the last few months, and that is the recent insistence I've seen from a variety of perspectives that everything is now fascist. During our last federal election, I saw many people in the lead-up calling our Conservative Party fascist, and since the Carney Liberals won, I've now seen many people asserting that they are fascist. This got me thinking, what is fascism, and what do people mean when they compare our two major parties to such a movement? To understand this, we must first define the word and understand fascism's historical significance. Fascism is a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that is associated with centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and forceful suppression of opposition. Hallmarks include authoritarianism, ultranationalism, militarism, suppression of the opposition, strictly enforced social hierarchy, economic control, and rejection of individualism or the promoting of group identity over the individual. Fascism began with the Fascisti Party in post-World War I Italy. Italians at the time had a very weak parliament that was failing over and over again to meet the needs of the nation, and Italians had also developed a victim mindset over not being awarded enough in peace settlements despite being on the winning side of World War I. Mussolini, to his credit, was very charismatic and offered a message of hope and stability in a very unsure time of poor economic health, morale, and high unemployment. So, what did it look like? Well, it was a totalitarian dictatorship, and Mussolini's rule rejected democracy, classical liberalism, socialism, and capitalism in favor of corporatism. Now, corporatism is not capitalism. Mussolini actually posited it as a third option between capitalism and communism. Corporatism is a system that, through the state and not private interests, organizes everyone into corporations and employees of corporations that sets everyone up into a very strict hierarchy linked to the state. While these corporations had some control, ultimately the power rested with the regime. For example, the regime set wages, interfered with business decisions, and pursued economic goal on behalf of the nation using control of the corporations. Fascist Italy only had 22 corporations, and this was so that they could assert maximum control over them, and also they said to promote national unity and solidarity. They implemented policies like protectionist tariffs, and they aimed to use their military to expand the Italian empire and establish control and influence over their Mediterranean neighbors. They implemented policies aimed at forcing the modernization of the Italians at an accelerated rate, not necessarily the pace that the sectors could handle. And there was official and forced suppression of the opposition and loss of the right to vote and or run for office. People technically could vote yes or no to approve pre-selected candidates for various positions, but they were all already members of the Fascist Party. So, are there any similarities to what we are seeing in Canada now? Well, yes, there are some similarities, but not enough for me to have the opinion that there is a rise in fascism. Many political ideologies share similarities between them, and it is often a question to which degree. But let's look at the specifics. Is the Conservative Party of Canada fascist? Well, they're not authoritarian. They want more freedom for the individual than other popular parties in Canada and do not have a history of authoritarian policy. They are not ultranationalists, though they promote national unity to the degree of having a strong national identity. They do not aim to raise one race, religion, group, etc. over the others. They are not looking to expand our borders using military force. They do not forcibly suppress the opposition. They are the most free speech of the popular parties in Canada. They accept the outcomes of elections, and there is no top-down suppression coming from the party. They do not wish to enforce a strict social hierarchy and believe in meritocracy. Though all of the popular Canadian parties want to control the free markets to a fairly large extent, the CPC wants the least and certainly does not want centralized control anywhere near the degree of fascism. When it comes to rejection of individualism, I can see the argument culturally that conservative voters seem to want to enforce the status quo more than left-leaning voters. This is not top-down enforcement and not to the degree of fascism. They do not promote tribes or group identities over the individual, and they promote economic individualism and freedom to make your own choices. So, are they fascist? I would say it's a resounding no. So, what about the Liberal Party of Canada? Are they fascist? Well, I think we've seen more authoritarian principles from the Liberal Party, especially during COVID. But to be fair to them, I'm not sure that other parties would have fared any better. And they did not hold on to this authoritarian power forever. It did make me less trustful of the party, but I did not think that it was fascism. They are not ultra-nationalist. I think it was interesting to see the party return to having some form of nationalism with their elbows up campaign in this previous election. And I think there is a propensity within the party to want to raise up minorities based on immutable characteristics instead of focusing on meritocracy. And I think this is a bad approach, but I do not think that it is fascism. They, again, are not looking to expand our borders through the military, and they do not forcibly suppress the opposition. They promote fair elections and accept outcomes. I would say that culturally, liberal voters seem more willing to engage in cancel culture, but that is not top-down or forced through the party. They also do not enforce a strict social hierarchy in the same way as fascism, although I think it is good to be aware of things like the wheel of privilege being taught in Canadian schools, which concern me, and I believe are maybe setting up a hierarchy under the disguise of equity. Though this is not fascist, this is much more similar to a hierarchy that would be set up by communism. If you're not familiar with the Wheel of Privilege, I'm going to link the Government of Canada website below that explains what they are teaching in schools, and you can decide for yourself if you think that lends itself to an unhealthy view of hierarchy. The Liberals do like to exercise more economic control than the Conservatives, and they do fall closer to fascism on this metric. But to put that into context, there are only 22 corporations in Mussolini's Italy, and today in Canada, there are almost 1.4 million. The Liberals are less friendly to small business and friendlier to big business based in Eastern Canada, and this trends in a poor direction, but it is not inherently fascist, and they do not directly control these companies. I think one interesting similarity you can draw between Mussolini's Italy and our current Liberal government is the forced acceleration at the detriment of Canadian sectors. Though it is not necessarily towards industrialization like it was in fascist Italy, I think that there are certain things like our government's baffling EV plan to convert our automotive sector to solely electric by 2035, and some of our net zero and alternative energy projects for which we don't have the technology or infrastructure in place. That could lend itself to forcing acceleration before sectors are ready. But it also remains to be seen if they will actually force this acceleration. It's perfectly possible that this party gets elected out and the policy dies with them, or they just give up on bad policy as time tells that it's not going to happen. As for rejection of individualism, there is no official tamping down of individuality in the Liberal Party. In fact, culturally, I would say personal expression outside the norm is more tolerated and even celebrated by Liberal voters on average than by Conservative voters. But there's also a cultural proclivity to identify strongly with group identities over the individual, so it's complex, but I don't think it's fascist. So if Canada isn't fascist, what do people mean when they assert that? I will say that Canada has a size of government problem. No matter which party we elect in, our government is bloated and huge. It employs more of the population and provides more welfare than it should, resulting in a dependent population. It wastes money and resources on programs that are poorly run and could be done better by private interests. Now, just because something isn't fascist doesn't mean there isn't room for criticism, but the incorrect use of a word like fascist seems to me to drive anxiety, fear-mongering, and sensationalism. Just because we are not fascist doesn't mean we shouldn't take time to keep an eye on what might be fascish. I think from the perspective of people critiquing right-of-center Canadian sentiment for being fascist, they're often citing examples of ultranationalism from fringe groups like neo-Nazis that have nothing to do with mainstream conservatives. I think they're also conflating capitalism, in which corporations act in the interests of shareholders and free markets, with corporatism, in which corporations are the extension of the government that function to centralize economic power. From the perspective of people critiquing left-of-center Canadian sentiment for being fascist, I think it is the cultural move towards more authoritarian powers being normalized and the social suppression of speech. Also, because of laws like C11 that effectively censor news on social media and affect how algorithms work, a lot of Canadians do not feel like they have access to the truth. I honestly think that we are much more likely as a nation to dive into some terrible idea in the form of socialism or some kind of corporatism involving stakeholder capitalism and ESG than we are to fall into fascism, but it is, of course, always a good idea to keep an eye on all ideologies that we think lack merit. And speaking of ideologies that lack merit, I, of course, would love to discuss the woke ideology, because the woke ideology got me good when I was young. It really convinced me, and I've since seen it for all the flaws that it has. And I think that in comparing it to fascism, we can really highlight some of the things in woke ideology that have gone terribly wrong. So just for funsies, what does woke ideology and fascist ideology have in common? Well, they both have a bent towards authoritarianism. Woke ideology wants to dictate what people can and can't say, think, or do, and I think a large amount of people who subscribe to woke ideology would be fine with authoritarian policy coming into effect as long as it was in line with their moral framework. Though woke ideology does not have the same flavor of ultranationalism, there is a tendency to promote certain groups over others. Just think of the way you've heard straight white men discussed on social media or in leftist circles, and you'll know what I mean. They do share a militaristic promotion and justification of violence, such as rioting and assassinations. There is culturally a suppression of the opposition, as in cancel culture. The woke ideology suppresses their opponents with claims of moral inferiority of anyone who defies them. The ideology also adheres to a social hierarchy and organizes who has the most value in society by who has historically had the least privilege. This is usually done by grouping people according to immutable characteristics like ethnicity, religious upbringing, sexual orientation, sex, etc., which limits social mobility and creates a very fixed hierarchy. The ideology also promotes economic control in the name of equity, control over the maximum amount of money someone can have, for example, the end billionaires or eat the rich movements, and to radically redistribute wealth. There is no adherence to meritocracy or to rewarding excellence. And, ironically, through extrapolating upon the principles of hyper-individualism and appreciating what makes everyone different, the woke ideology has now become one that rejects true individualism and boils everybody down to their various group identities. Individuals are considered and judged on the basis of the combination of group identities they take on. One of the main differences between woke and fascist ideology is the aims of the ideology. Woke ideology does not lend itself to a goal of stability and strong leadership, and it often identifies a goal of tearing everything down to restart. My point isn't that woke ideology is fascist ideology. It's not. My point is that woke ideology shares the hallmarks of many terrible ideas, like fascism, communism, and religious fundamentalism. It is its own ideology, and we should be wary of it and reject it based on its lack of merit. I think it is foolish to think that an ideology has to fit into a neat box that we've historically seen before, like fascism, to take down our civilization. As times change, so do ideas, and we need to assess new ideas on their merit and not their popularity or how good they sound on the surface. And with that, I will leave you. Thank you for joining me today on Losin It. If this resonated with you or you thought any of the ideas were interesting, please subscribe to the channel or share with a friend. And please feel free to let me know what you thought of today's episode, whether you agree or disagree in the comment section below. Just keep it respectful. We are Canadian, for goodness sake. If you have a longer piece of feedback or a story you would like to share with me or perhaps to the channel anonymously, please email me at stephislosinit@gmail.com. That's Losin It without the G. It'll be in the description box down below. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.